Okay, now let's move on to the oral knowledge. It's a very good book, and it contains a lot of episodes here. And you got the first chapter, and it's much longer. It's very longer. One of the longer chapters. The first one. One of the longest chapters. This is the longest chapters, and actually I did an essay about it. You do not have the whole story with you, so let's go to the essay I did first. Then we'll go to the first chapter. Oh, yeah, okay, go on. Yeah. Okay, reading the Poetics of Sing, Nature importantly in our knowledge and Riders to the Sea. Abstract. Sing is probably one of the greatest playwrights Ireland has ever had, but he's often been slighted by many, including Joyce, but Yeats seemed to have found him the greatest of all playwrights in his time. The paper claims that Sing was well prepared to write great plays even before he visited Ireland, and he offers his postwork, The Iron Islands, as evidence. It is already a great piece of work, very poetic, full of observations and feelings and thoughts, which he draws from the plays he's to write. The epigraph. John Synge and I, Augusta Gregory, thought all that we did, all that we said and sang must come from contact with the soul. From that contact, everything Anthus-like grew strong. Okay, Yeats, in his 1923 Nobel Prize address, The Irish Dramatic Movement, makes special mention of two of his friends, Lady Gregory and John Synge. Lady Gregory was his colleague, an ardent patron of his when Yeats was in difficult times, psychologically and physically, being repeatedly rejected by his lifelong love, Maud Gonne, and even when Yeats set his hands to writing his story plays, a few of which have both of their names. As an accomplished playwright who was awarded Nobel Prize in Literature in recognition of his plays as well as poetry, Yeats thinks Synge, who died in 1909, was the greatest dramatic genius of Ireland. Autobiographies, page 138. To some, and to me, indeed, Synge is a great playwright, if not the greatest of Ireland. To some, however, that is not so convincing. Synge's visit to the Iron Islands in 1898 must be one of the most remarkable examples on record of how a sudden immersion in a new environment converted a man of ostensibly mediocre talent, complete failure, in fact, into a writer of genius. The decision for Synge to go was made at Yeats' suggestion. Two scholars, Green and Stephen, I don't agree with them. When I came across this comment on the caliber of Synge, I became curious to know how a complete failure, in fact, turned into a writer of genius. Synge's The Iron Islands, the book, is not merely a travelogue. It is also the gem of his work that shines forth brilliant through an age. I'm not the only one that thinks so. T.L. Han, one of the great scholars. Han is one of the first who saw the greatness of Synge as writer, though he touches on this book in passing, just as Yeats touches on Synge here and there without mentioning the book. Han's general introduction to Synge, the complete plays, is probably the best introduction to the real Synge, though there is some reservation in it when it discusses language. Han's concluding analysis of Synge's rhythm is closed with a quote of Yeats' insight into Synge's dramatic language. What follows is what Han says with the support of Yeats. Yet any attempted analysis of technical devices is no more than a gesture that may draw attention to the subtleties of the language. which only attains its full life when spoken in the theater by those who can command its strange harmonies and overtones. It's true that the strong rhythms may become monotonous in the reading, but even in amateur productions, it'll come to life if the imagination allows the prose to speak for itself. On this, we may quote Yeats. Synge found the check that suited his temperament in the elaboration of the dialects of Carrie and Nara. The cadence is long and meditative, as profess the thoughts of men who are much alone, and who, when they meet in another's houses, as they wait at the day's end, listen patiently, each man speaking in turn and for some little time, and taking pleasure in the vaguer meaning of the words in this sound. It seems to me that Han discusses language in Synge's plays, whose subtleties it is to catch unless it is on stage, while Yeats talks about Synge's literary language in general, that is under the influence of Gaelic, the Aran Island speak in the quotes above. And I thought I have to agree with Yeats, who claims that Synge, the greatest dramatic genius of Ireland, and that reading his prose, the Aran Island, Synge is indeed a truly great poet who has so aesthetic an eye and so sensitive an ear, so tender heart to observe and sympathize with people, nature, in the island, and the sea and the sky. See and hear the slight changes in and the smallest moments of animals and plants, smell and feel keenly all that surround him living there. What is noteworthy is the fact that along with this profound love and understanding of nature and the Irish people, there is a passionate realization of his cruelty, loneliness, and the uncertain menaces of mountain and of sea. Yeats also found this characteristic in Synge. Synge told me once that when he lived in a small peasant's house, he tried to make those about him forget that he was there, and it is sure that he was silent in the crowded room. It is possible that low vitality helped him to be observant and contemplative. This passion makes him observe well all about him, nature, animals, and people on the islands. Synge is like the fisherman in Yeats' The Fisherman. It's from Yeats' poem, a man who does not exist, a man who is but a dream. With this realization, the playwright is to write a good book, good work, Riders to the Sea, and when you read the Aran Islands, you will know that what is the flower in the play has already been fully displayed in this very prose work. Thus, here I aim at reading the Aran Islands, extremely beautiful prose pieces, comparing what's been observed in the Aran Islands and with what's become art in the greatest one-actor in the last century, Riders to the Sea. Synge described the Aran Islands. The geography of the Aran Islands is very simple, yet it may need a word to itself. There are three islands, Aramor, the North Islands, about 9 miles long, Inishmaan, the Middle Island, about 3.5 miles across, nearly round in form, and the South Island, Inisher, in Irish East Island, like the Middle Island, but slightly smaller. They lie about 30 miles from Galway, up the center of the bay, but they are not far from the cliffs of County Clare on the south, or the corner of Connemara on the north. This is the first paragraph of his three-paragraph foreword to his book, The Aran Islands, which was published in 1911 after he died in 1909. Two paragraphs are almost as short as this paragraph. This foreword seems to me to be a glimpse of his characteristic style, which is to flower in his plays later on. Let me show the first and last of the book's paragraphs. The first two one-sentence paragraphs. I was in Armagh, sitting over a tub fire, listening to a murmur of Gaelic that is rising from a little public house under my house. First paragraph. Second paragraph is, the steamer which comes to Aran sails according to the tide. When it was 6 o'clock this morning, when we left the quay of Galway in a dense shroud of mist. Then the third keeps driving the shoreline of Galway in dense fog, vertically and calmly, and then the passengers. Then the fourth paragraph begins the description of his finest contact with Aramo that comes in sight. His unusually perceptive and enlightening observations of people, animals, plants, and the sky and the sea of the three islands are unfolding in an enchanting way through the whole book. And finally, the book ends in a one-sentence paragraph. But could the story ever over with so much reverberation in our heart, like this story? The next day, I left with a steamer. This is the last sentence. This is the last paragraph. It's one word. So it's characteristic of, I think it's characteristic of Singh. Just prior to this last paragraph, Singh describes his last party on Inishmaan, to which he will never come back again in one sentence. A little late when the party broke up downstairs, my old man got nervous about the ferries. They lived some distance away and set off across the sandhills. In the Aran Islands, Singh never loses a sense of balance in form and matter, not to mention love and passion for nature and people in these islands. The whole prose, can't we call it the prose poem, is a well-made piece of music itself from start to finish. One of them, and the language is out of key, as he has been a keen ear for music. Now, I would like to focus on two aspects in Singh the poet, the visual and the oral. First, Singh is sensitive to the music and languages. As a matter of fact, sometimes he plays the violin to accompany the dancing of the islanders who enjoy dancing. He has once wanted to be a musician. As he says, in my 16th year, everything changed. I took to the violin and lost almost completely my interest in natural science, although the beauty of nature impressed me more than ever. As in the first paragraph, part one, the book consists of 4 parts, with illustration by Jack Yates, the younger brother of Yates. Singh is busy hearing and looking, a visitor who, for the first time, had just landed on the North Island Aramo, listening to a murmur of Gaelic. And 6 paragraphs later, a little after midday, when I was coming back, one old half-blind man spoke to me in Gaelic, but in general, I was surprised at the abundance and fluency of the foreign tongue. Then on page 4, they, 2 little girls, they spoke with a delicate, exotic intonation that full of charm, and told me with a sort of chant how they guide ladies and gentlemen in the summer to all who is worth seeing in the neighborhood. At the beginning of the book, we learned that the highly oral Singh then decides to leave Aramo for Inishmaan, the middle island where Gaelic is generally spoken and the life is, he thinks, lived in most primitive ways. In spite of the charm of my teacher, the old blind man, the old man I met the day of my arrival, I have decided to move on to Inishmaan, where Gaelic is more generally used and life is perhaps the most primitive that is left in Europe. Singh is to stay and live in a cottage in Inishmaan for a few weeks each year from 1898 to 1902. He died in 1903, hearing the people speaking Gaelic every day. I'm settled at last on Inishmaan in a small cottage with a continual drone of Gaelic coming from the kitchen that opens into my room. Not only that, but also Singh gets used to the way of life in Inishmaan. One day, he learns to walk the way man first walked on rocks and fields. He has never realized this when living in other places like Dublin or elsewhere, where life is adapted to new ways, which have long become part of our life today. He walks the primitive man walked. At first, I threw my weight upon my heels, as one goes for nearly a mile, jumping from rock to another with a single ordinary step. And here I realized that toes have a natural use, for I found myself jumping toward any tiny crevice in the rock before me and clinging with an eager grip in which all the muscles of my feet ached from their exertion. The absence of the heavy foot of Europe has preserved to these people the agile walk of the wild animal, while the general simplicity of their lives has given them many other points of physical perfection. Seeing has a keen eye, observing everything around him from the very beginning of the travelogue to the end. The observations are subtle and in full detail, which find expression in its place. How he begins his first sailing to the island is depicted in the third paragraph of part 1. A low line of shore was visible at first on the right between the movement of the waves and fall, but when we came further, it was lost sight of, and nothing could be seen but the mist curling in the rigging and the white circle of foam. We can imagine this steamer leaving the Galway quay and soon in the middle of the sea. Then the high sense of seeing is all over the pages of the book, a feast to the eye. So many exquisite portrayals encountered of the people, animals, birds, and sea and waves, the sky and clouds, the sun and rain, and so on. The rain has cleared off, and I've had my first introduction to the islandish people. As I was going across the sand hills, one down-sailed hooker, a ship, hooker, glided slowly out to begin a voyage. Another beat up to the pier. Troops of red cattle, driven mostly by the women, were coming up from several directions, forming with the green of long tract of grass that separates the sea from the rocks, a new unity of color. Not only the nature around him, but also the ways these island people live, as he illustrates his use of time in life. The general knowledge of time on the island depends, curiously enough, on the direction of the wind. Nearly all the cottages were built like this one, with 2 doors opposite the other, the more sheltered of which lies open all day to give light to the interior. If the wind is northerly, the south door is open, and the shadow of the doorpost moving across the kitchen floor indicates the hour. As soon, however, as the wind changed to the south, the other door is open. The people who never think of putting up a primitive dial are at a loss. This system of doorways has another curious result. It usually happens that all the doors on the one side of the village pathway are lying open, with the women sitting about on the threshold, while on the other side, doors are shut and there is no sign of life. The moment the wind changes, everything is reversed. Sometimes when I came back to the village after an hour's walk, there seems to have been a general flight on the one side of the way to the other. Very interesting, right? Singh, being tender-hearted, depicts meticulously the people, animals, plant on the islands. The island is full of, is sometimes dull and sometimes beautiful. Dull, for example. A week of sweeping fogs has passed over and given me a strange sense of exile and desolation. I walk around the island nearly every day, yet I can see nothing anywhere but a mass of wet rocks, a stream of surf, and then a tumult of waves. The salty limestone has grown black with the water that is dripping on it. Where I turn, there is the same gray obsession, twining and wreathing itself among the narrow fields, and the same well from the wind that tricks and whistles in the loose rubble of the walls. It is cleared, and the sun is shining with a luminous warmth that makes the whole island glisten with the splendor of a gem, filled the sea and sky with the radiance of blue light. Actually, I did a painting of this. The whole day was brilliant, so I did a few paintings all day. I have come out to lie on the rocks where I have the black edge of the North Island in front of me, Galway Bay. Too blue almost to look at on my right, the Atlantic on my left. a perpendicular cliff under my ankles, and over me innumerable gulls that chase each other in a white saros of wings. People and the customer, what he has observed with deep interest, the observation of which is to find full use in his play, Riders to the Sea and other plays. The funeral customs. After Mass, this morning an old woman was buried, and she lived in the cottage next mine. More than once before noon, I heard the faint echo of the keen. I did not go to the wake for fear my presence might jar upon the mourners. But all last night, I could hear the strokes of a hammer in the yard in the middle of a little crowd of idlers. The next of kin labored slowly at the coffin. Then the coffin was carried out, sewn loosely in sailcloths, and held near the ground by 3 cross poles lashed upon the top. As we moved down to the low eastern portion of the island, nearly all the men, all the oldest women wearing petticoats over their hats, came out and joined in the procession. While the grave was being opened, the women sat down among the flat tombstones bordered with a pale fringe of early blackened, and began the wild keen or crying for the dead. Each old woman, as she took her turn in the reading recitative, seemed possessed for the moment with a profound ecstasy of grief, swaying to and fro. Profound ecstasy of grief, right? Swinging to and fro, bending her forehead to the stone before her while she called out to the dead with a perpetually recurring chant of sobs. All round the graveyard, other wrinkled women looking out from under the deep red petticoats that cloaked them, rocked themselves with the same rhythm, intoned the inarticulate chant that is sustained by all as an accompaniment. The morning had been beautifully fine, but as they lowered the coffin into the grave, thunder rumbled overhead, and hailstones hissed among the bracken. In Irishman, one is supposed to believe in a sympathy between man and nature. Actually, the changes very quickly, right? So, but seeing makes links it with the kind of fate, right? Human fate. One day, Singh happens to see a few rowers fighting with the rope sea, his eyes reverting alternately on one huge wave after another, thrashing against the fragile animal skin boat and on the people in it. Late this evening, I saw 3 old Kiroks with 2 old women in her beside the rowers, landing at the sleep through the heavy roll. They were coming from Inisha, and they rowed up quickly enough till they were with a few yards of the surf line, where they spun round and waded with a prow towards the sea, while wave after wave passed underneath them and broke on the remains of ship. 5 minutes passed, 10 minutes, and still they waited, or just paddling in the water, and their hats turned over their shoulders. I was beginning to think that they would have to give up and row round to the lee side of the island, when the Kiroks seemed suddenly to turn into a living thing. The prow was again toward the sleep, leaping and hurling itself through the spray. Before it touched the man in the bow, wheeled round. 2 white legs came out of the prow like the flash of a sword, and before the next wave arrived, he had dragged the Kiroks out of danger. Wonderful, right? Not only that, but also Singh gets used to the way of life in Irishman. One day, he learns to walk. Not this one. 7, 8. Okay. Oh, got lost. Page 190. Okay. Singh is excited to have watched the island people coping with nature generally. He at once marvels at the wisdom of these people and feels so sorry that people in Aramor are no longer the same as in Inishmaan. He noticed fine change in Aramor and Inishmaan. The North Island is a bit modernized. I was in the North Island again, looking out with a singular sensation to the cliffs across the Sound. It is hard to believe that those hovels I can just see in the south are filled with people whose lives have this strange quality that is found in the oldest poetry in legend. Compared with them, the falling off that has come with the increased prosperity of this island is full of discouragement. The charm which the people over there share with the birds and flowers has been replaced here by the anxiety of men who are eager for gain. The eyes and expression are, though the faces are the same. And even the children here seem to have an indefinable modern quality that is absent from the man of Inishmaan. So the biggest island, visitors, everyday visitors come and they rent a bike and ride through the and go back in the afternoon, every day. So very noisy and then very quiet in the evening. Before he leaves the Aran Island, Singh keeps in mind all that he's seen, felt, as exquisitely recorded in the Aran Islands. It is full of visual, musical beauty, strong feelings of islanders in dire condition of sea and island. It is moving and fires the imagination of many who will come to the islands. It is a paean to people, animals, plants, nature, and Aran. Now, a few comparisons between the Aran Islands and the Riders of the Sea can display how Singh makes use of his material in this play. I'm interested in how the things he's seen and recorded in the collection of the essays fit in the play, how parts cohere as a whole. About the language of Aran Islanders, Singh talks a lot in this book, as discussed above. Han points to the three aspects of Singh's dramatic language: idiom, imagery, and rhythm. He says, the idiom requires some familiarity, but that it doesn't present any difficulty in understanding. For instance, the way means so that, as in, give me the rudder and I'll put them up in the loft the way she won't know of them at all. It also means so that, she, he, can, or should, as, or as if, as in what way, how. In the early part of the book of the essays, what interests Singh greatly is a canvas canoe he is in. Here is his description. Early in the morning, the man of the house came over for me with a 4-oar curragh, that is a curragh with 4 oars on either side, as each man used it too, and we set off a little before noon. It gave me a moment of exquisite satisfaction to find myself moving away from civilization in this rude canvas canoe of a model that has served primitive races since man first went to sea. The sail is only used as an aid, so the man continued to row after he'd gone up, and as they occupied the forecraft seats, I lay on the canvas at the stern, and the frame of slender lead, which bent and quivered as the wave passed under them. In the play, Riders to the Sea, there is a mention of this canoe when the old woman, Maria, is now recalling all the men lost, as the last son is just gone to the sea. Maria in a low voice, but clearly, it's the little like the like of him, the young priest knows of the sea. Bartley will be lost now, and let you call in Eamon and make me a good coffin out of white boards, for I won't leave after them. Maria continues without hearing them. There was Seamus and his father and his own father again were lost in the dark night, and not a stick or a sign was seen of them when the sun went up. There was patch after was drowned out of curraghs that went over. Here we could imagine that when Singh was first in the curraghs, he felt the wave under him, and he must have felt that when the wind rises and the sea is rough, life in it is merely at the mercy of nature, with which finds expression in Maria. It is just what Maria has experienced. As she says, It's the like of him, the inexperienced priest who is new to the island, knows of the sea. While she is drifting into the past midnight, the body of Bartley is being carried, nightmares, the body of Bartley is being carried into the room. She asked, is it Patch or Michael or what is it at all? Thus, the past, Patch, and the present, Michael, are mixed up as if her mind is muddy with the two or three, inclusive lost son, Bartley, whose body she will now see in a moment, the severest blow to her life. Lost death is staring her in the face. And I think it's proper to touch on one mastery stroke of seeing as dramatist, Nora, in a whisper to Catherine. She is quiet now and easy, but the day Michael was drowned, you could hear her crying out from this room to the spring well. It's fonder she was of Michael. And would anyone have thought that, Catherine? Slowly and clearly, old woman will soon be tired with anything she will do. And isn't it 9 days herself is after crying and caning, making sorrow in the house? The youngest daughter, Nora, as well as Catherine, hardly understands her mother, their misunderstanding of mother, arousing the audience's intense sympathy over the humanly unbearable tragic burden on Maria. Her daughters are not sympathetic to her mother, Maria, who has made all the efforts to save her lost son, Bartley. She is not less fond of him than Michael. She is not less fond of him than Michael. Maria now loses everything, and she has nothing left. She speaks to herself and the world, which to me is the grandest monologue a modern one actor could have achieved in the 20th century. Maria puts the empty cup mouth downwards on the table and lays her hands together at the Bartley's feet. They are all together this time, and the end is come. May the Almighty God have mercy on Bartley's soul. Okay, we read it. This surely is the sublimest moment of an old woman who prevails over the whole world of the Aran Islands, and metaphorically, even over the Almighty God in nature. God and nature can't stop her making the greatest speech, preaching all living or dead, him and nature. Yet, on a human level, it seems it is still a great pity the old woman without any single son left is thankful to the Almighty God for Michael having had a clean burial in the far north, who had been a great power and fisher, great rower and fisher. She is still thankful to God for Bartley, now having a fine coffin out of white boards and deep grave, surely, with the aid of the rope. The play does not leave any room for the audience weeping in the tightly woven space of one act, with one intense dramatic effect rippling every instant from start to finish, the audience's mind and horror. Finish. Okay. In the final monologue by Maria, there is a stage direction in the middle. She poses, and the king rises a little more loudly from the women, and sings away, continuing. Sing has seen the island in Ishman. I walk around the island every day, yet I can see nothing anywhere but a mass of wet rock, strip of surf, then a tumult of waves. Then he described the wind. It is as if we are hearing the keen of the women in display that accompanies our last monologue. The salty limestone has grown black with the water that's dripping on it. Wherever I turn, there is the same gray obsession twining and wreathing itself among the narrow fields, the same wail from the wind that shrieks and whistles in the loose rubble of the walls. All the seeing has seen in the islands become part of play, which makes so moving a play, just as we experienced in this last monologue. Okay, the essay is, this is the essay about it, and I recommend you read the book itself, and you'll find a lot of interesting things in it. What do you think of the poem? Certainly, we read The Riders to the Sea. It's a one-act play, but it's a very powerful play, right? I think most of you like it, though you do not like the ending. The ending is tragic, but these days, movies, stories, and plays, and tragically, right? I think that's more realistic, right? And certainly he is a great playwright, and we also read The Aran Islands. What do you think of the prose? Fantastic, very beautiful, right? Simple and clear, and not a single word is wasted in the whole of the essay. And so you can learn much from seeing. And also this afternoon you read a couple of poems by him. What do you think of his poems? A good poet, right? Maybe he is not a great poet. He didn't create much poetry, so we cannot call him a poet. Still, I like his poems also. Well, we've covered things as a playwright, prose writer, and a poet. And so your reaction to his works are very interesting. And in one of your homework, I said, I asked you to talk about the props. And I used the property, stage property. So some of you talked about the realistic things, right? But also one student talks about the natural objects, rocks and trees and things like that. Quite interesting. Anyway, one of the essays done by a student is like this: Riders to the Sea, props. The props used in the play, Riders to the Sea, are very important to the plot than the actual set of the play. Do you think so? Props are important. And the writer thinks props are more important than the set. I don't know. Most plays use multiple sets and acts to aid in directing the plot, whereas Riders to the Sea uses only one set and one act. That's quite rare, right? Some of the most critical props are introduced as soon as the play starts. We are presented with nets, oilskins, spinning wheel, and whiteboards, all of which are critical to the play. To start, the nets and oilskins are indicative of the lifestyle that Nora, Maria, Bartley, Catherine live. They are fishers and sailors, so they need the nets to catch fish, the oilskins, waterproof garments, to wear when out at sea. Right? The spinning wheel's importance is less clear at the start of the play, but later we see how it is important. Spinning wheels are used when making clothes. And since it was not an exact science at this point in history, people could generally identify clothes which they had made because most people had a distinct style. They have sheep, right? So they weave a thread, a spinning wheel, right? With the spinning wheel. Obviously, when trying to identify Michael through the piece of flannel and sock, Nora and Catherine could recognize their own work, thus proving that Michael was indeed the dead man found near Donegal. Lastly, the whiteboards are the props that signify the intention of making a coffin. I was not aware of this until later in the play, when the character directly referenced the white boards and the purpose. These are significant props because it shows how death was a regular and normal part of these people's lives. I would never think of keeping material to build a coffin in my house because in our modern society, people are expected to live long lives. It is just really astonishing to see the stark difference between life then and life now. Well written, right? And spinning wheel. One of you talked about the spinning wheel. And the spinning wheel is what? Has a long history in Greek mythology. There are 3 goddesses spinning wheels, deciding on the fate and things like that. Very interesting, right? Also, nobody talked about it, but there appear a new ghost, right? Bartley is going to the sea, and Michael had been drowned, right? And he washed up, and but the Maria, their mother, see the vision, the ghost, and this kind of thing has originated from the Irish mythology. Right? When people die, ghosts appear to guide him to heaven or hell. So, in Korean tradition also, there appear a guide from hell, right? From heaven, right? To guide the who has just died, right? So, it's based on the Greek Irish mythology. Interesting, right? Nobody commented it, but another scholar talked about it. And this student talks about the use of props. Throughout Riders to the Sea, the spinning wheel has an important meaning. At the beginning of the play, Catherine spins the wheel. Her reaction is similar to the goddess of Greek mythology. In Greek mythology, 3 goddesses of destiny are spinning the wheel and making the destiny of human men by the thread made from it. In other words, spinning wheel signifies destiny in mythology. Therefore, it can be said that spinning wheel in the play means fate and the cycle of characters, like Bartley and Michael. In my opinion, the rope also signifies a similar meaning, has similar meaning in the play. Bartley looks for the rope, but Maria wants him to leave it. In this context, the rope could mean Bartley's life or destiny. In addition, the bundle which contained Michael's clothes raises up the anxiety of play. The audience curiously waits for Catherine Nora to open it. As the girl hides this bundle into the top loft, the anxiety is rising up. Right? Okay. Okay, reactions to the play. One student says this: the most impressive part to me about the oral knowledge, the most impressive part to me is the long story that old Pat told Sing. It's a story about a young man who left his mother to go out into the world to seek his future. After he left his home, he met a farmer who promised to give him work to do. So the young man went with him and became a cowherd. Then the strange thing happened. 3 great giants came towards him each day in succession. when he was fighting with the first giant, he told him that he would give his magic rod if he doesn't kill him. But the young man didn't hold his hand. He defeats all of these 3 giants with a sword inside the rock. After that, the farmer told him a beautiful king's daughter was to be eaten by a great fish. Then the young man took the sword and the shoot and the horse out of rock and rode to the shore where king's daughter was sitting. The young man goes there 3 times and finally he kills the worm and saves the beautiful king's daughter. At the end of the story, the young man and the king's daughter gets married, and the young man is given all the estate. The other student, I like this book. This book is very dark glimpse into a dying world. There are moments that are quite beautiful and telling as to how things really are on the Islands. First, the priest, whom we never meet, but are always told about, braving the rough seas day and day, risking his life as he tends his flock. Though he never met this man, I couldn't get the image out of my head of a man dressed in priest's black, standing upright on a small boat, tumbling upon the waves in a fear gale. I would love to hear his story. The other telling moment was for the funeral of the young man. This was beautiful and very sad scene in which they bury him in the same spot where his grandmother had been buried, and they find a skull among the black planks on the coffin. Perhaps this is why all the stories end with absolutely no point. That life is, to them, pointless. Life is hard. The women wear out in childbirth before they are even 20. The man drink and fight and die at sea for a pittance of a catch. Or the lucky ones move to America and never come back. Their story unfinished. Okay. More about the Aran Islands. The essay, the book, Aran Islands, explains how Singh lived among the ordinary Aran Islanders, listening to the flow of their everyday conversation, observing their way of life, and reveal how they stir these artistic passions. Part 1 tells the story of Singh's life in the Aran Islands, and along with the Islanders describe the story as happened in the Islanders and his views on these stories. There have been many sad stories. They are very interesting. I have never been quite sure of the travel book genre. What exactly is it? A guidebook, a memoir, a series of letters, home, autobiography, landscape painting, in verse, perhaps all of this. I think so, right? The first part of the Aran Islands contains Singh's living experiences in the northern island, Aramor, and the middle island, Inishmaan. He recorded details of people, which he met and talked with in Ireland. Sometimes islanders guided Singh around the village or told him several stories. Singh settled in a small cottage in Inishmaan, lived with islanders. He closely observed their lifestyle, such as clothes, concept time, works, weather changes. Sometimes he walked around to record his feelings in beautiful nature, especially about the sea. He also watched and experienced islands' diverse events, like funeral. Okay, good. And another student. He's talking about my essay, right? And another one. So, I think most of you enjoyed reading John Singh, his plays, prose, and poems, Okay, next week, Wednesday, on Wednesday, we're going to read